You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Chris Voss Show. As always, for 16 years, 2,700 episodes, we've been giving you the Chris Voss Show with the most amazing, brilliant, insightful, high IQ minds on the show. That's our thing. We're sticking to it. I think the lawyers, can I get away with saying everyone's high IQ on the show? I think so. Anyway, guys, except for me, of course, that I'm the exception to the rule. Refer the show to your family, friends, or relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Today, we have an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his insights, his entrepreneurial journey with his new book that came out May 27th, 2025. It is entitled Growing Your Own: Common Sense Advice for Developing Leaders Within a Small Business. Rich Ashton joins us on the show. We're going to be talking to him about his insights, his experience, and maybe how you can use some of that to improve your life. That's what we do here on the Chris Voss Show. We don't do things to have you destroy your life. Those are different podcasts. Rich Ashton brings a wealth of real-world experience to his book, Growing Your Own. And in his in-person management training courses, he does that as well. Rich has spent 4 decades building and growing a successful HVAC and plumbing business, and one key to his success was his ability to coach technicians and salespeople into dependable, motivating managers. Welcome to the show. How are you, Rich?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you as well. Give us .coms, .nets, wherever you want people to get to know you on the interwebs there.
Growingyourown.net. Or my email, I'd love to talk to people directly, is rich@growingyourown.net.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside this book?
Let me tell you how the book came about first, and that'll explain it. Frustrated, like most small business people, with the choice between bringing outside leaders into a company when it's ready for that next step, versus promoting people who are not ready for leadership roles. It's a common dilemma in small business, one I faced several times. I failed in both directions, and I finally decided if I was ever going to retire, I needed to train my replacements. And so several years ago, we began a training program with some of our best and brightest, and all from the field, with one exception. And it worked so well that I decided to write a book about it. During the course of the training, I began to write a blog every 2 weeks to the employees to try to give them something that was current and about management issues that we were facing. After 2 years, I'd about run out of ammunition. I read through the blogs. There were 52 of them at that point, and said, this is good enough to publish as a book, even if it's only a legacy book. And I did that. I reduced it to 35 chapters. About 2.5 pages apiece. They're all very simple. They all relate strictly to small business, and I'm very proud of the final result. So I was an author by accident, I guess.
There you go. Well, it's a wonderful place to be, because people really look at authors and go, "Wow, you wrote a whole book. You must be smart." It's really funny how they get around to that. Like when I wrote my first book, I was like, people were like, "Oh man, you're really smart." And I'm like, "You've been here for 50 years. You followed me through everything. Like, now you think I'm smart just because I wrote a book?"
Yeah, I've faced a little bit of that. It is funny. People look at you a little bit differently.
Yeah, they look at you differently. Like, you must be smart. And you're like, where have you been the whole time I've been telling these darn stories? But that's the way it is. But yeah, it's hard to write a book. It's challenging to write a book. So there you go. Now, you mentioned when your business reaches that next level, hiring the managers, and that's one of the things you have to do, especially as an entrepreneur or as a leader. You've got to seed the people to replace you because it's just inevitable. I mean, you can't live forever. Number one, last time I checked, and according to Jimi Hendrix, or was it Jim Morrison, nobody gets out alive. But you've got to bring in the upper team, especially if you're in a sale moment. I think were you in that moment where it was time to sell your business and get it to where you could turn that over, or how did that work?
I looked at that, but we have such a unique business and so many unique employees in our culture that I'm not comfortable just turning it over to anybody. So I made the decision after investigating a little bit. I made the decision that if I could figure out a way to do it with our own people, and ultimately maybe I'll sell it to them. Maybe I'll bring in some financial help to them. I don't know. That's a couple years down the road, but you don't spend all that time building up a company and then turn it over to somebody that's going to operate it differently.
Yeah.
In today's world of private equity, there's lots of people out there that do business a lot differently than we do. And I'd be terribly uncomfortable doing that to the employees and the customers.
Yeah. A lot of the private equity and funds that we see, they just go in and strip the companies in a million different ways. We've had authors on that come detail how the games they play, and they'll throw like they'll throw the company into bankruptcy, then buy back the parts of their own company they threw into bankruptcy. And this is crazy.
There are very good private equity groups out there, but there are horror stories that abound, particularly in the HVAC industry, which has been consolidating for years. There's a million buyers out there, and they all talk a good game, but at the end of the day, you have to be just really, really careful who you entrust your baby to.
Oh yeah, and you've spent your baby. How many years were you in the business and building it?
Well, this business, 38 years.
Wow.
I've been doing small business for 45 years, and then I was in a large business for 10 years before that.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
I'm old.
You and me, I'm feeling it too. I'm sure you are a little bit. So tell us, give us more details on what you teach in the book. What are some axioms maybe, or favorite stories you have in the book that you want people to learn to help them?
The book is based on several principles: accountability, proactivity, honesty and integrity, employee empowered culture, and then the quest for knowledge, which I think is a dramatically overlooked trait of up and coming managers, or by up and coming managers. I was very lucky early in my career. I had a young man pull me aside and say, "You don't really know much about business, do you?" And I said, "You're right, I don't."
Wow.
And I didn't. And he said, "I want you to start reading 5 business periodicals every week, and I want you to read the Wall Street Journal every morning." And I started that. I was 24 years old. So 52 years later, I am still reading. Now I read about an hour and a half every day, or listen to podcasts or audiobooks or whatever. But the pursuit of knowledge is incredibly powerful. And when you commit your life to it, it's surprising how much you wind up learning. And then your role as a leader is to influence people. And the more you know about people, the more you know about the world, the more likely you are to be able to influence them. And so it's just common sense. And everything in the book is common sense.
There you go. Well, that just makes sense. Let's put it that way. See what I did there? What was your raising like? What was your experience like in being raised? How did you get the entrepreneurial disease, or the bug, as we like to call it? Once you get that drug, you're kind of stuck on being an entrepreneur for life, pretty much.
My dad was a school administrator, but he was a frustrated entrepreneur, and he always wished he had been an entrepreneur. He did some side things. But he was very smart, very creative, very hardworking, and he gave me a lot of the traits that I have carried on into my entrepreneurial career. He also was a very authoritarian style leader, and I copied that style until I learned better. And I kind of had a comeuppance in my early 40s that what I was doing was not working as well as some of my friends, and so I made some changes at that time. But to go back a little bit, when I was in the Navy for a while after dropping out of college, I then was very fortunate to go to work for a company called Trammell Crow, named for a man, Trammell Crow. he was a real estate visionary. It was a real estate development company based in Dallas. Phenomenal company, smartest people I've ever worked with. Great work ethic, great ethic, just a great, honest way to do business. And they developed in me a foundation that I then was able to carry through. I unfortunately was not passionate about the real estate business. And so after 5 years as a partner there, I sold my interest back and said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I really like this small business stuff, and I'm going to pursue small business. So I began buying and selling and operating and turning around businesses at that point, and I think I've had 8 businesses over the 45 years.
There you go. And so what inspired you to get in the HVAC business? And, you've been running it now for 38 years. What brought you to that business particularly?
I felt like I was good and passionate about customer service and employee development. And I felt like I could use both of those skills. And then I'm a decent communicator, so I throw that in there too. And I thought that even though I can't go out and do the work, I think I can inspire people to be special. And so that's what I've tried to do. The company was in horrible shape when I bought it. It was near bankruptcy. Oh, wow. I was young and I thought I could turn it around in 2 years. It took 5.
Oh, wow.
But it was just a lesson a day. It was a great, sharp learning curve. At the time, it scared me to death. I got very close to disaster at more than one point. But that's what makes you enjoy it, when you turn the corner. And so many years later, it's been a great experience.
There you go. The one thing I love about entrepreneurism, especially if you have to come up from being poor or come up from being, not having money. I suppose if you're, like right now, Rich or what's his name, Ellison, the big billionaire, he's buying CBS, buying Hollywood companies and stuff. Larry Ellison, yes, thanks. And so he's buying them all for his son, and his son's running them. So I can see why if you're rich and your dad buys you a company, you may not be good at running it or good at just being a good human being. But the great thing I love about entrepreneurism is, and I'm not saying he's not a great hunter, a human being. I'm just implying that. I'm getting to the point. So learning to be an entrepreneur, coming from zero or coming from a point that you have to work your ass off, you have to be self-accountable, you have to be self-actualized, you got to use your brain, you got to be on point. It brings out character and develops character, I think, in you that sometimes you don't get if someone hands you something for free. And I think that's what I'm trying to say with the Ellison analogy. And I mean, it honed my character to be self-accountable and self-actualized like nothing else. Would you agree?
I completely agree. One thing I have come to learn fairly late in the game is that entrepreneurs are just different people. And so when I started the training program to try to raise up leaders in the company, I began trying to teach them to think like I thought.
Yeah.
And I did not need entrepreneurs in the company, nor were they capable of being entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We're just different. And, I another realization that I've come to recently is that being married to an entrepreneur is no day at the beach. And my wife's a wonderful woman, and she really had no interest in business. So it probably was a good match. But only recently did I realize the roller coaster that I put her through all these years. But entrepreneurs are a different breed. And the nice thing is we kind of run in packs. I have a number of friends who are entrepreneurs, and so they've been through the same thing, but it's either terrifying or exhilarating, and it's kind of on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Sometimes it's half a day terrifying and half a day exhilarating.
Exactly.
So, but I mean, just the responsibility that you have, the buck stops here. There's no one you can turn to and blame. You can't be like, well, my boss, he's a jerk. I blame my boss all the time, but he is a jerk, and he's me. And he fires me daily, which he should, but I keep showing up because that's the kind of commitment we have here. I think it's a mental health commitment rather than just a professional commitment, but I'm crazy after all these years.
It seems like you're having an awful good time doing it.
I do. Well, I do what I love. I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories, their journeys. I think I'm at the age, I joke that I'm at the age where I'm so sick of me and all my stupid stories and all my crap that it's just more pleasant to hear what other people are up to.
Well,
But
I bet you it's fun hearing the stories every day
oh
from your
yeah,
guests.
I learn more from this show than probably the audience does, because number one, I get to ask all the cool questions,
Mhm.
and I've seen a lot of times we'll have people on this show that have been on other podcasts or they've been on TV. They'll walk off of CNN, they'll be on our show, and then they'll go back to MSNBC and do their book tours. And I like that I get to ask the questions, and of course, we have a longer format of time than like network TV does. Somebody comes on for 3-minute segment and they pound through the show on them, and that's it. And I'm like, you didn't get to ask the good questions. And then I learned so much. Like, I don't know a lot about Catholicism. I think yesterday we had somebody on talking about Catholicism in the church, and I learned for the very first time at age 58 that there was 7 books of the Bible that the Protestants put aside.
Mhm.
They were just like, yeah, it's not for us. And I didn't know that. It was kind of interesting to hear about what they were. And so I get to learn all sorts of stuff, and I get to learn. I learn from everybody on the show. That, or if I don't, if they tell me something I already know, they usually give me like a different angle of looking at it, or a different perspective. And I'm like, oh, I never looked at it that way. So I learn a lot. I love it. Yeah, I like people too. I'm a story collector.
It's obvious.
Yeah. Now, not all people. There's some people I want to choke to death, but that's another story. They're on Twitter usually. Anyway, so you developed this, you wrote the book. Now, how did you one of the things about the business, blue collar companies, like you, I've owned a lot of companies. Sometimes dealing with those folks is very different than white collar, sometimes different than sales, because these are guys who are really good with their hands. They're talented and they're skilled in a tactile way that, like, I could never do. Like, I'm not allowed to work on anything mechanical because I will break it because I'm an idiot. But there are some people that they have that talent and I don't.
Yeah, you're 100% right. They are
Mhm.
different, and I realized real early that I thought I was inspiring. I thought I was a good communicator. They didn't want to hear. They could like me. They could respect me as a leader and as an owner of the company, but they didn't want to hear it from me. They wanted to hear it from somebody with a technical background. And so
Ah,
I learned early on that I had to work through the guys who were capable of being leaders in order to communicate with the troops.
mm,
The other thing that in building up and raising up leaders out of blue collar employees that you find is that all of us have ceilings, and they have different ceilings than I did. Maybe it's because your parents didn't talk to you about leadership, or
mm,
maybe they told you that you could never go very far, or maybe you were, because you didn't get a college degree, you just assumed that you could never be something. And we started our program by identifying whatever those ceilings were for every employee, so that we could begin to either get rid of the ceiling or realize that they were probably not going to go very far in the leadership program. I happened to have breakfast with one of the employees this morning, and he's one of my favorite stories. He came to us 19 years ago, was on the lowest rung of the food chain in the company. His intention was to work for 6 months to earn enough money to travel back to Mexico.
mm.
And 19 years later, he gradually rose through the company. He's now one of the strongest leaders in the company.
Wow.
He never had any earthly idea that he could be a leader, and
Wow.
we built him up one step at a time. And you could always tell he was smart. We could always tell there was something
Ah,
under the surface.
mhm.
But as we raised those ceilings bit by bit, he just took off. And
Wow.
and he would be the first one to tell you, not only is he shocked at his leadership skills in the company, but he's so much better as a parent. He's so much more of a leader in his family. And that whole transition, and we have a number of stories like that. That's probably the longest duration one, but those are just so exciting to see. And just because people start out in a blue collar role doesn't mean that they can't become the owner of the company.
Ah, there you go. And now, how do you identify those people? Like, one of the challenges I had in trying to figure out promotions and stuff, like, one of the things we had a lot of great salespeople, And I found that great salespeople do not always make great sales managers. It's a whole different sort of mindset,
Mhm.
and kind of it's two different mindsets. Let's put it that way. How did you identify the people who want to be leaders? Because a lot of people who like doing the work, they love just doing the work. They don't want to have to think about anything new. They just want to do the rudimentary thing, show up every day and do their work. And God bless those people because we need them. If it wasn't for them, we just have a room full of cooks and nobody doing any work, or leaders and trying to lead the cooks. No cooks. So how did you identify the people that were management quality, I guess?
So I'll use a sports analogy because everybody understands those. But on any kind of a sports team, you have the stars, and then you have the unofficial leaders. And maybe it's an offensive guard who really holds sway in the locker room. So you look for those people in your organization. Who do the other employees naturally respond to?
Mhm.
That's your first indication that somebody's got some natural leadership talent. They may not want to develop it. They may not want to take it any further, but we look for that spark first of all. And then the second thing is to delegate relatively minor tasks to them and see how do they respond. Do they grab the bull by the horns? Do they love the idea that you entrusted them with some responsibility? Or do they spit the bit and show you that that's really not a course they want to pursue? If they're 80% successful on the first project, you applaud them and give them a second project. And I just find that leadership, particularly with people who have not been formally trained, is a step-by-step, day-by-day process.
Mm. Yeah, step by step, day by day, and all that
Well,
sort of stuff.
sounds like a song, doesn't it?
It does, right? Right. It does. It's really interesting how that works, and trying to find the right people that can manage well. Because management, doing a job, you know how to do your job. There it is, blah blah blah, and stuff. It's pretty simple and easy. But once you go into management, then you've got to be good with other people. You got to cite some of the things you've talked about. Being good at communicating what your message is, invoking good leadership. Did you what sort of training did you develop for maybe other entrepreneurs out there to listen in at? How did you train these folks? What was the key to building good communicators, good leaders, et cetera, that you utilized?
I use a lot of stories and anecdotes when I teach people, and I find that I was listening to a relatively well-known leadership book, audiobook, the other day, and I thought all of these principles are great, but my people would not respond to this stuff, and it's too long. There's too many examples. It's too theoretical, and so with the people in our company. I had the blogs turned out to be a great kind of an accidental format.
Oh.
They were short, 2.5 pages. Maybe it took a minute and a half to read them. They all had an illustration that was practical and believable. All of the principles that I taught or teach are things that you feel like you could read them this morning and put them in place this afternoon.
Oh.
It doesn't require, I'm not a very deep thinker, so it doesn't require a lot of deep thought. As the subtitle on the book says, it's common sense. All of them are common sense. Everybody can benefit by reading that. My youngest son was halfway through the book and he called me and he said, "Dad, this is as much about life as it is about leadership." And I kind of like that. I think it's probably true.
Yeah, it is true. In my book, Beacons Leadership, we talked about how, everyone's a leader at some point in their life. I've had so many people say to me, they go, "Well, I'm not a leader. I don't have a title, Chris, a manager or CEO or vice president. I don't have that. So I can't really be a leader." No, a parent is a leader. If you're leading children, I hope you're a leader as a parent, because otherwise the teenagers are leading you.
Yeah, no, there are definite levels of leadership, but it starts out with, if you get yourself out of bed in the morning, you led one person.
There you go.
And then it goes from there.
You give me an epiphany to think about. I need to lead myself in the morning when I get up out of bed and have a coffee.
Sometimes that's a challenge.
I'm doing leading right now. I just like everyone to know that I start leading. I am making the coffee and I am 1 foot out of bed. So there you go. Yeah. So, anybody can be a leader. I mean, there are times of crisis where, usually one or two or maybe some more people raise, crime is being committed against somebody. They jump in and save them. There's disasters that happen where leadership comes. Everyone can be a leader, and everyone usually is a leader. I mean, it depends upon who's the dominant in your relationship. There's a leader. There's a leader everywhere. And so, it's a great skill development to learn to communicate well, to learn to be effective, to learn how to be a good leader, to learn how to be a good judge. That was the one thing I always tried to be as a CEO, is to be a good judge, because sometimes you're presented with situations where it's like Solomon. You've got to make a decision to either cut the baby in half or try and make the right decision of who's maybe responsible or at fault. Or, I've had two people before me where I can't figure out which one I'm supposed to fire because they were fighting at the office, and I don't know who started, I don't know who propagated it. And, one of the things I used to do was when two people fought at the office and I needed to sell their business so that they didn't fight anymore, but keep them as employees, I just bring them into my office. They'd sit down and I'd just be with my back to them working on my computer. And then I turn around and I call my executive secretary and I'd be like, Krista, I need you to bring in two firing notices, whatever you call them in the nice way. And then I would just look at them both and I turn around and keep working on the computer, and I just sit and let them stew. And then Krista knew that she had to wait like about 10 minutes to come in. So they'd be sitting there quiet, hating each other, wanting to start a fight with each other, and realizing that I was probably going to cut off both their heads. And so then she would bring in like blank pieces of paper, some fake paper, and sit on my desk, and they'd just be shitting their pants because they're like, he's going to fire both of us. And I'd be like, look, I'm like Solomon. I'm not going to figure out which one of you is right or wrong, but I'm going to cut the baby in half and fire both of you unless you can learn to get along. So you have two choices. You can either hit the bricks or you can get along, and there's not going to be any more issues between the two of you. What sounds best to you guys? Oh, they're best friends after that. Oh no, Chris, it was just a fight.
You must be better at that than I am, because I tried that a couple of times and it didn't work out.
There's a drama that you have to put to it. So you have to wait.
That must have been what I missed. Yeah.
You have to let them sit with it. So like I said, they would come in the office. I would have them sit down. I'd turn my back to them and work on the computer for a moment. And then I would turn around and make the call to Krista. And then I look at them like, you guys really fucked up. And then I turn around and listen to the computer, and they would sit there, and then the wheels start calculating. And then, like I said, she had to wait 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then she'd bring in the forms. Oh, that was the other thing. She'd bring in the forms, and they wouldn't be firing forms because I got away with this. And she would give them this look after she set them on the computer, like, tis, you guys really fucked up. And they're looking at her going, we really fucked up. And and then I just sit there for a while and then turn around to them and I explained to them what I was. And they just really knew that I was fine either way. But yeah, it was always interesting. They'd always be like best friends after that point.
Like I said, you're better at that than I am. I've certainly have faced that a lot of times. I believe in getting to the bottom of whatever it is that's irritating people, and usually it becomes pretty clear.
Yeah.
There's a chapter in the book called Facts Beat Speculation, and managers who let gossip rule the day or influence their decisions don't do very well.
Yeah, I call them the high school managers. They work off of popularity and rumors and silly games, and I hate those people because I had to work for a few when I was young. But I mean, we had a pretty solid system, and I just learned that the other thing I learned, and maybe you can speak to this, is if you spend a lot of time interviewing, you do 3 to 4 interviews, you spend a lot of time getting to know the person and not just hiring the first person who shows up and fogs the mirror, it will save you so many nightmares that you would have had if you just hire like that. And then one thing we found, when you hire, the more interviews you do, the more relaxed they get, and the more they'll hang themselves if they have anything to hang themselves. Like they'll be like, yeah, well, this one time I was in prison. You're like, what? You didn't tell us that in the first interview. And they show up for the third interview in their underwear and their pajamas. They got their feet up on your desk. And they think they got it in the bag, and they start telling you all this stuff that you're like, oh, you have 5 sexual harassment complaints with your private employer, huh? Good to know. We'll call you.
Yeah, we've developed a really good idea about who succeeds in our culture and who does not. And so we always start the interview with that in mind, looking for that specific kind of person that we know matches up with the existing people that we have. And
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you on a multi-interview format. In fact, we have non-managers do the third interview just with people that are going to be co-workers, because we think that that provides pretty good insight.
Oh yeah. I mean, most definitely. I can tell employers out there, if you're an entrepreneur, hire, have multiple interviews with people. It's amazing the shit that will come out with people, and make sure you read the resume. I can't tell you how many times I was going through resumes for salespeople, and there would be this gap in the resume, and I'd be like, "There's a 3 to 5 year gap here in the resume. What were you doing between that and that?" And they'd be like, "No, it's not." And I'm like, "Well, this is your resume. You wrote it." And they'd be like, "Well, can I see that?" And I'm like, "No, you wrote it. You have seen it." So what happened in those 3 to 5 years we're missing? Usually it's prison.
Yeah, I know we've come. I know exactly what you're talking about. We've come across that.
And finally they'll just be like, "Yeah, I went to prison. I had a meth problem. I was doing, I was stealing copper, or some bullshit." Domestic violence, assault. I don't think we everybody committed murder. Maybe we did have one that was second degree, but it was always funny, and it's amazing how people tell themselves if you give them a chance. Like I used to always tell me and my interviewers, "Shut up, quit selling the job. The job sells itself. Shut up and listen to people, because if you just shut up and listen, they'll talk."
Yeah,
And
open-ended questions will bring out a lot more information.
Oh yeah, and they'll sit there and talk, and I'll just oh, tell me more. And eventually, especially after by the third interview, they're just showing up flip flops with a cup of coffee and wearing their pajamas, and they're just comfortable as hell. They'll tell you everything about them, and you're just like, "Oh, well, that's what we were looking to know about," or they won't. They'll stay professional. So, let's mention one thing, and I imagine you talk about this in your book. One of the things for me is culture in a business, and it's really important to have a culture of good leadership, ethics, morals. People know you're a good judge. Being trusted as a boss or a CEO or as a manager, people got to know that you have their interests at heart and that you behave in that way. How much important is the culture with you, and being able to establish and maintain that culture?
It's huge. We started in the interview process. We have very clear values and a very interesting culture in our company. We recently read as a group the book "Start with Why" by Simon Sinek, which is a very popular book.
Simon's great.
It helps you crystallize your thoughts about why you're in business. In our case, we provide exceptional, not just really good service, but we provide exceptional customer service through empowerment and support of employees. And we talk about that in the interview. We talk about it every day, one way or the other. I am someone who's highly connected with the employees, as all of our managers are. So I know them personally. In many cases, I know their kids, maybe have been to sporting events, that their kids are participating in. They know I care. They know the other people care. And when employees feel supported and empowered, they can do amazing things. And so that really defines our culture right there. We start with the ethics and the integrity, but we really walk the walk on supporting and giving our employees opportunities to become something.
There you go. And have a future. I mean, that's really what employees want. They want to have a future. They want to know that they're safe and secure in their environments, and that the work that you do. Like, I've worked at a place where I've kicked ass, took names, and done a great job spectacularly. I've worked double the hours when I was young beyond what I did, and I would get fired usually because of a recession, or sometimes they would take another person who was older and replace them with me, or they'd be like, "Oh, we got this guy, we moved him from the other satellite office, and he's been here longer than you, so he needs to have a job, and we don't have space for you anymore." And you're like, "Thanks, well, I'm not drinking at the office every day like he is, and I work hard." But have fun with that. And it's something that happens. So people want to know that there's that safety. What else do you talk about in the book, or maybe you want to talk about here on the show that you want to let people know about?
Well, we talk about in the very first section of the book is about communication. And if you asked 100 people what screwed up about their company, 100 people would say communication is our greatest weakness. So I don't know that I have solved communication problems for everybody in the book, but I believe in a very simple style of communication. I think of communication as a circle. You start it at one part of the circle with the idea that you're trying to convey. You make sure that the person heard what you said. You check back in to make sure that if action was required, that there's some progress on the action. And you complete the circle by saying, okay, is the action complete? Did we finish, or is there a little bit more to go? And if you think of communication in a circular fashion like that, it's amazing how complete your communication is. And you don't wind up saying, well, I told them to do such and such. But if you told them, but you didn't follow up and do the rest of the completion of the circle, communication is ineffective. And then we talk about the inspirational style, which is nice to have. And it's important for a leader to have that style of communication. But if all of your communication is like Tony Robbins and you're always on a high, it tends to wear people out.
Yeah.
You've got to vary the message. You've got to deal with facts. You can't allow speculation and gossip to run your company. Those are some of the early parts around communication in the book.
Yeah, it's a big rumors can really hurt your company.
Rumors
Especially if you
kill you.
get especially if you get those employees that are saboteurs. We used to call them back in the day in the car business. We used to call them tubers. And what they would, they would come in and tube everyone out, basically negative. They would just try. They were usually the guys who couldn't do well selling or performing. And so what they would do is they just kind of, you throw the whole company and the sales process under the bus and trying to get everybody to sell crappily. In fact, I think one time we saw a whole telemarketing unit of like 12 people quit one day, and I think it was 8. And we had one employee come in that was new, and he was just negative Nancy, and he totally got these people tubed out on the company. We've had some employees that we've written up a couple times start spreading complete lies about the function of our company and the funding of it, and in a logical way that you could just be like, there's no way that could be possible because it would be unsustainable. But there's people and employees that will destroy your company, and you've got to be on the watch for them. But you've got to have good ethics, good morals, and usually that will attract and keep the best employees, and the other employees will usually find a way to move themselves along if you don't.
Weak managers tolerate that kind of employee a lot longer than they should be tolerated. And what people don't realize is that someone like that is doing damage to other employees along the way.
Oh yeah.
And when you replace that employee, the chances are you may replace them with a superstar. So not only do you lose the low performing employee and the cancer in your company, but you pick up a real star. Yeah. And it's one of those things that when managers are fearful, they won't pull the plug on something like that. But boy, you can recognize those employees pretty early in the process, and they just have to be gone. That just, there's no two ways about it. They are almost never salvageable.
Yeah. And it's just, and it's their character and also the way they just behave. And I don't know, maybe they're just raised wrong or something, but it's usually the ones who aren't performing, who don't really want to do the work. And so what they're trying to do is bring everyone down to their level so that they don't stick out so much and get fired.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure you've seen plenty of examples.
Many times.
There you go. Now on your website, you have in-person coaching. Do we want to promote some of that or tease that out a little bit?
In-person training more than coaching.
Okay.
I can go any place and reproduce the training course in kind of short form. I do it over 3 sessions in 2 days on site and with groups of 10 or smaller. I'm happy to do that, and that's a fun thing. I do public speaking, and that's probably my favorite thing to do these days, besides being on podcasts. I'm just really having fun sharing this message because it's so needed. Every day on the news, you hear that we are moving more and more toward a skills-based economy, toward the trades. and they're becoming more important. But the tradesmen don't receive much in the way of leadership advice or training along the way. I'd love for this book and my approach to be something that helps young leaders, small business owners, and wannabe leaders become something more than they currently are.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Leadership's really important, and the great thing about it is just like sales, you can use that skill and talent just about anywhere. And few good leaders are hard to find. I like how you talk about communication and confirmation, because so many times as a leader, I gave communication and instruction without asking, do you understand what I told you?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when it would bite me in the ass, I would have to, instead of pulling out the axe, I would have to go, did you misunderstood something about what you're told? And then I'll find out that, yeah, I hadn't clarified it. That's on me. And they hadn't understand it correctly, or that's their interpretation. And yeah, and it's on me. So I have to go, okay, well, we're going to try this one more time. And let's see if we can communicate right. But yeah, that's a really fundamental way to make sure that people understand you, whether it's your children, whether it's your friends, or whatever it is, you know, making sure that everyone's on the same page and all ships are sailing in the same direction, as it were.
Well, if everybody agrees that communication is the fault or is the problem at every company, then somebody ought to do something about communication. It seems like.
Yeah, it's hard to get people to talk to each other now, and you know, you have this remote work and all this other stuff going on. So as we go out, anything more you want to tease out to people or promote while we're have you on the show?
I'd just love for you to download the book. It's in audiobook form. It's in hardback, paperback, and ebook. I think that it's a small investment, and I think it will pay not only big dividends. I think it will pay immediate dividends for you. I'd love to hear from you if it works for you.
There you go. And I mean, you got, what was it? Was it 34 or 43 years of business?
I've got 55 years in business total, but 45 in small business.
Folks, you can't learn that unless you want to spend the next 55 years doing it. So grab the book, because it will save you some time and some heartache and brain damage, because it's hard going from ground zero. And back in the 90s, when we started our companies, there wasn't anybody you could talk to. About the only person you could hire to get advice for business, because the internet was barely starting then. The only people you get advice was to hire an expensive business lawyer to give you business legal advice, and that was too, for a small company, that was too much. But buying a book like this, you're going to get that rich resource of 50 years of knowledge, and you can't even put a price on that. It's priceless, really, when it comes down to it. So
well, and they're just really, because I looked, there's really not much help for small business available on the internet.
Yeah.
And most books are aimed at larger organizations on leadership. So
they really are. Like Tom Peters is like Fortune 500 companies, and Drucker and all those sort of stuff. And they're good books and good authors. So thank you very much, Rich, for coming to the show. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation.
There you go. Order up the book, folks, wherever fine books are sold. Growing Your Own: Common Sense Advice for Developing Leaders Within a Small Business, out May 27th. 2025. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok, and all those crazy places in it. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning: consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.